Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. On today's show, Matt O'Lean had a chance to sit down with a special guest.
Coming up later on Prairie Pulse, we'll look at 3 new stories from our Inside Energy series from Colorado and Wyoming. But first, our guest is Peril Grossman, the Director of the Consumer Protection Division at the North Dakota Attorney General's Office. Thanks, Peril, for coming on Prairie Pulse.
Well, you're welcome. It's great to be here.
Before we talk about consumer fraud, maybe tell folks about yourself, your background, where you're from originally, and how you got in with the AG's office.
I was born and raised in Minot. I graduated from Minot State University with a business degree, and then I went to work for the North Dakota Tax Department for about 8 years, eventually found my way to law school in Grand Forks, and then I was in private practice for 4 or 5 years, and then I returned to the Attorney General's office. First, I worked in our civil litigation division, representing kind of the commercial interests of the state, the Bank of North Dakota, and what was economic development at that time. And then an opening came for the director position in the Consumer Protection and Antitrust Division, and the Attorney General hired me for that, and now we're looking something like 17 years later, and here I am and loving every minute of this job.
Now, I suppose some people don't realize there is a Consumer Protection Division. They have recourse and things like this. So what exactly does your division do? What do you cover?
Well, we cover almost anything. We accept consumer complaints. We'll investigate consumer fraud. We'll mediate a lot of complaints because not all complaints involve fraudulent conduct. So we'll mediate a great deal of those complaints, and we have a high degree of success. The parties aren't always able to reach a resolution, but we have 2 administrative assistants that probably answer up to 100 calls a day on consumer questions. I have 4 investigators that investigate complaints and consumer fraud. One of those is a licensed peace officer, and then I have 2 other assistant attorney generals that work with me. So between us, we have a very strong workload. We probably open over 1,000 files each year that include both complaint and investigations, and probably close a similar amount. We'll, in a typical year, might recover up to $1 million in consumer restitution, and substantially more when we get involved in multi-state and other legal actions. So we stay very, very busy protecting consumers, and then of course trying to educate consumers. Matt, we will probably put on between 75 and 100 consumer fraud presentations throughout the state each year to any group that'll listen to us. High school students, professional groups, law enforcement, and so we do an awful lot of consumer protection education because it's, that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So
I'm going to ask you about a lot of common complaints. We're going to get into specifics, but I know one that you mentioned, which might surprise people, is contractors not finishing work. That's one of your big issues, right? Peril, tell me about this.
That's a huge area, and I could probably talk for an hour on this, but in the last 2 years, we probably have initiated in excess of 150 investigations involving contractor complaints and unlicensed contractors. In many instances, we will recover advance deposits for work that wasn't completed. We will fine the contractors. We've probably issued upwards of $50,000 or more to fines. But the thing we like to remind consumers is you have to be very careful up front, Matt, because many of these companies are gone. Like with the Minot flood, they came in for a very short period. They took a lot of money up front. They didn't do all the work. In many instances, they weren't qualified or capable of doing the work, and then they skipped the state. So we regularly go to the Williston, Dickinson, and Minot area, and we do contractor inspections and visit job sites. We're seeing a fairly high degree of compliance with the large general contractors at the commercial projects and the school buildings and those kinds of things, but we continue to find all kinds of these cowboy contractors that drift in from Montana, Arkansas, and elsewhere. They're not licensed. They often don't know what they're doing, and it's not unusual for them to take $15,000 to $50,000 or more and then sometimes do none of the work or maybe do half the work, and it's shoddy, and simply skip the state without doing the work. So we spend some time chasing them, but very, very difficult to find those individuals and get restitution from somebody out of state that doesn't own anything more than a pickup truck and a toolbox.
Yeah, so your workload has increased because of the Bakken play, no question.
It certainly has. It's had an impact with the oil boom, and particularly, I think, in the Williston, Dickinson, and Minot areas with contractors. Because the local reputable contractors are so busy, I think people are more willing to turn to these kinds of one-man contractors who give them a song and a dance and just simply don't deliver.
What are some other common complaints your office gets? We'll get into more specifics, but tell us some others you investigate.
Well, we get complaints regarding travel scams. We get complaints regarding timeshare presentations. The odd thing about timeshares and these discount buying clubs are they'll charge you $20,000 to $40,000 to buy one of these timeshares, and then there's a whole different industry that will come along 2 to 5 years later, and you'll have to pay them to take these timeshares off your hand, because a lot of times people leave these to their kids in their wills. They don't want to pay the maintenance fees. So it's such a valuable product when they sell it to you that you have to pay somebody to then take it off your hands because the companies won't take them back. You know, those are the kind of complaints we deal with. I think some of the worst situations we're seeing now, Matt, involve the Jamaican scams and the lotteries and the romance scams. So I'd like to just kind of touch on those if I could. The Jamaican scams is a huge problem. So that you get these foreign calls, they tell you you've won huge sums of money, you have to pay some taxes and some duties, and you just keep wiring and wiring money until they just simply bleed you dry. Recently in western North Dakota, we had a gentleman that was engaged in a farming partnership with his brother for many years. He spent over $500,000. To this day, he still thinks that he's involved with a woman that he's going to marry or is going to be involved with. He's now working, I think, a low-paid job. His entire family is alienated. It is just a sad, sad situation. So probably a year or so or more ago, Attorney General Wayne Stenjum and U.S. Attorney Tim Purdon put their heads together and formed this task force involving our offices, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, U.S. Postal Inspector's Office, and local law enforcement. And so we're getting a lot more aggressive. The U.S. Attorney had some arrests. They arrested a high-profile Jamaican DJ who was coming over to Florida, was a packed mule, taking the money back with them on the flights, and they indicted about 25 other individuals. So that's going to trial very soon. It's a possibility I'll have to testify in that as some sort of background information. So that's a huge area. I also have to touch on the romance scam, because sometimes people think some of these dating sites are fairly harmless. We're seeing a very serious trend here where individuals get involved with somebody, again, from a foreign country. They think this individual is going to marry them. Before you know it, they're wiring money to them. Just last week, I had a report of a victim that came into our office. We've interviewed him. We're sorting through the paperwork, who sent over $200,000 to this scam artist. And it's very sad. And an additional factor is he also took money from his mother's bank account because he had access to her account. So it wasn't all of his money. Some of that $200,000, probably a majority of it, actually belonged to his mother. He could actually be facing criminal charges. So that's a little bit of the tip of the romance scam. The tax scam, it's very easy for con artists to call folks and say, you haven't paid your taxes.
Right.
Peril, you're going to go to jail. I can have an agent over there in an hour if you don't pay this.
The IRS doesn't do that on the phone, right? That's what people have to know.
Never does that. A Wahpeton gentleman sent about $9,000 with 18 green dot money cards at about $500 a piece. So $9,000 he sent to these con artists, and he didn't owe any taxes at all. And so the list kind of goes on and on with those things. The jury duty scams, threatening to arrest you if you don't pay $2,000, and almost always it's with a green dot money card. So my advice to folks is be very careful with those green dot money cards. The minute you read that code over the telephone, the money is wiped from that card and it's gone. So there's just kind of a huge laundry list, and it goes on and on. The Microsoft, your computer is causing internet problems in your area.
Right.
Download this icon.
Maybe gullible is not the right word. I'm sure a lot of these people are pretty intelligent. What goes through, I'm not trying to ask you to be a psychologist, but what goes through one's mind especially when there's so much education about this, not to do it?
Well, I'll touch on some of this, and gullible maybe isn't the right word, but
Okay.
I always say, Matt, that people have different levels of sophistication. Many of these romance scam victims are bachelors,
Sure.
they're farmers, and they just don't have a lot of contact with the outside world. I think a big component of the success of these con artists is fear. They threaten people with arrest, and none of us want to be arrested because we failed to show up for jury duty or because we think we didn't pay our income tax returns. And so I think that threat of incarceration and huge fines scares a lot of people. And then a lot of it with the Jamaican scams is that these individuals are simply isolated. They are typically elderly victims. They have at their disposal substantial sums of money after a lifetime of very hard work, and it's sitting in the account, and along comes somebody who gets friendly, is silver-tongued, and is able to talk them out of all this money. And they always come to our office after it is too late. So every once in a while, someone will call our office ahead of time, and we'll be able to tell them this is a scam. And there are even those rare folks that even you tell them they've been the victim, they refuse to believe you because they have built such a trusting relationship with these people.
Let's talk about a couple others, grandparent scams and Nigerian letters.
Yes, grandparent scams continue to be a problem. We do some media on it from time to time, but it's fairly well known, and so the press doesn't always pick up on continued victims, but it occurs on a regular basis, and the stories are very different, but it sometimes involves a call from someone claiming that they've been arrested, someone planted drugs in their car, or they didn't pay for a fishing license in Canada, or didn't pay dues on shopping in Canada, or they've done on vacation at Fort Lauderdale during a college trip. And a lot of times they sound very distressed and they sound very excited, and so Grandma and Grandpa don't recognize them. And then they say, "Is that you, Jennifer?" And yes, it's me, Jennifer. Well, it doesn't sound like you, honey, and I'm just very, very afraid, and I want to put this policeman on the phone with you. And so and they tell them to rush to the MoneyGram store or the Western Union store. These people do this. They're very secretive. They often won't tell the clerks at the Western Union store why they're wiring this money, because we've kind of trained and educated the folks at Western Union and MoneyGram to ask lots of questions, hand them this list of warning, these disclaimers, make them aware of this, watch for these folks who are coming in repeatedly and wiring thousands of dollars. And when they do in fact ask and try to be diligent, these individuals will say, no, I know what I'm doing, this is for a family member. And so sometimes you can't stop these people, but that grandparent scam continues to be very effective because, of course, people love their grandchildren. And if they would just take a moment, stop and say, I'm going to call my son, I'm going to call my daughter and ask them where the kids are on their cell phone. And they'll find out that, they're in college, they're sitting in NDSU in the classroom just where they've always been. And sometimes it's just simply too late. They've already wired the money.
And what are Nigerian letters?
The Nigerian letters are you're eligible for this huge amount of money if you just submit a claim. Another aspect of the Nigerian scam is where we advertise a vehicle, a garden tractor, for $3,000 in the magazine or online, and they'll call and say, I'll give you your $3,000. I owe a business associate $2,000. It's very difficult to transfer money, so if you don't mind, Mr. Grossman, I'd like to send you a check for $5,000. You keep $3,000, deposit in the bank, and then you wire $2,000 to my business associate in Cincinnati, Ohio. And unfortunately, Matt, victims will say, well, I'm good. Garden tractor's sitting in the shed. I've got $3,000. Why do I care if I send $2,000? Well, the reason they should care is that almost always about 10 days later or so, the bank notifies the individual and says, that check was bogus, that was deposited, those were fraudulent funds. So now that individual is out that $2,000 or $3,000 that they wired. So it's just a very effective scam that continues to work, but more and more people are getting educated about this type of scam.
And what are phishing scams, Peril?
Phishing scams are very prevalent, and there's spear phishing and regular phishing scams, and spear phishing is more targeted at an audience, but we'll see these on our computer and we'll be told that there's a problem with our credit card and we're going to be locked out of it if we don't click on this link. Matt, we click on the link and it asks for all of our personal information, our mother's maiden name, our PIN numbers, our bank account numbers, credit card numbers. Boom. oftentimes within minutes, you will be the victim of identity theft because they now have stolen your identity. They know your social security number, and so they will, extend credit on your credit cards. They'll withdraw funds from your bank accounts, and it continues to be very effective. And or they'll call you and out of the blue and tell you there's a problem with your credit card. We need this information. So we try to continue to remind consumers, your bank, your credit card company, they will never call you and ask you for your PIN or password. They have that. They have more information about you than you are even aware of. That you've forgotten most information that is already in their files. So if consumers ever get a call out of the blue, they should simply hang up the phone. They can call and report it to the Attorney General's office or ask us to check it out. Might be a good time for me to say we have a toll-free number, 1-800-472-2100. Give us a call. Operators standing by. Truth is they're very busy, but they are very anxious to help people who call.
And what is slamming?
Slamming is really, it involves the unauthorized charges on your cell phone. It started with landlines, and it might be charges for voicemail or all kinds of things they just put on there and you don't notice. And a lot of times there's such small charges, $4 or $5 a month. You might pay it for 2 years before you even realize it. And now that's shifted a lot to cell phones, and then of course unauthorized charges maybe for downloading ringtones that might never have occurred. Just a variety of things that they can slam you with, and a variety of unauthorized charges they can place on your cell phone
Now,
account.
another good resource, Peril, is companies that you have investigated that are fly-by-night, have done bad things. You'll keep a list of them on your website, right? How can people access that?
We maintain a database of all of our complaints. So you know the businesses that we have complaints against, but we do keep a list of the real bad actors. We'll issue cease and desist orders, press releases, and if you go to www.ag.nd.gov, you can see all of our reinforcement actions, and that educates our consumers, our businesses. As a quick example, our churches, our small businesses are getting hit with these phony business directory scams. And they send you a bill for $500 and you never authorize that business listing, and they keep billing you and they keep harassing you. And now you'll see we have press releases on there that tell people, don't pay these charges. Contact the Attorney General's office because these companies are acting illegally. So just a wealth of information is available on our website.
Are there prefixes of phone numbers if you have caller ID that you should be aware of? Like, this is not legit. I always say when someone calls and there's a delay when you said hello, that's never a good sign.
Well, this is a great question, and I'll tell you why. Because there are, and then also you can't rely on it. When I say there are, a lot of times the Jamaican scams will use the prefix 876. Okay. It's somewhere in the Caribbean, but not always. But now with the ability to spoof, and this happens regularly, they can use a North Dakota area code number as the prefix on their phone. So they can use my number or your number to call somebody else to perpetrate a fraud. And what we hear time and time again from victims in other states is, I thought I could rely on it. That was a 701 area code, and you folks in North Dakota have a reputation for honesty and integrity. So they can spoof telephone numbers.
What's that toll-free number if people have a complaint for your office?
1-800-472-2600. Please call. Again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Okay. Thanks, Peril, for being on the show. Peril Grossman, the director of North Dakota's Consumer Protection Division with the Attorney General's office. Stay tuned for more.
Prairie Public is pleased to be partnering with our public broadcasting friends in Colorado and Wyoming on the Inside Energy series of TV and radio reports. Now you can watch 3 stories. The first is about the solar energy town of Del Norte, Colorado. Our second story is about Wyoming wind. And finally, a story on Wyoming's love affair with coal.
Hey, I'm Dan Boyce with Inside Energy, and these are solar panels. But why would I come to Del Norte, Colorado, population 1,600, to show you some solar panels? Well, because of this.
There seems to be the potential for larger fires than there has in the past. Definitely.
The forested mountains outside Del Norte are coming back to life now after a 170 square mile wildfire complex scorched the area last summer. For local wildland firefighters, it means more training.
Yeah, it runs instead of jumping jacks.
For Del Norte, it means thinking about their power system.
There is a potential risk for the town of Del Norte to lose power for an extended period of time.
The town gets electricity from one major power line coming into the San Luis Valley through the very forests with higher fire risk. Inside Energy research shows average monthly power outages across the U.S. have risen 600% in the last 15 years. Increasing severe weather and wildfire events have a part to play in that.
There's growing concern about the resilience of the electricity grid.
That's how we get back to the solar panels. Del Norte uses them to power a number of city services, like the water supply, the police station, town hall. But if there was a big power outage, these panels would be knocked out, useless. That's because, like most solar in this country, the panels are still hooked into the grid, unable to operate on their own. How to avoid this?
This means putting in place some gateways that can allow smaller pieces of the grid to disconnect.
The gateway technology to create so-called microgrids does exist, and it is advancing. And with more wildfires or superstorms likely, many towns like Del Norte are considering those options. For Inside Energy, I'm Dan Boyce.
I'm Lee Patterson for Inside Energy, and this is Wyoming Wind.
With the mountain ranges the way they're laid out, the wind funnels down through here and it produces some good winds.
Some might also call it evil. Wind rips across these plains hard and often, in the winter, blowing up to 60 miles an hour. But Wyoming is only 14th in actual wind power production, despite having one of the best resources in the country. Same thing is true in North Dakota, the number 12 producer. Lots of wind, but
At this time, we are limited by transmission lines that carry the electricity away from the wind plants out in these remote areas.
and into populated areas that could actually use it. But those sort of long-distance lines just don't exist. The Denver-based Anschutz Corporation hopes to change that with a gigantic wind farm and transmission line called Trans-West Express. It would cross Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Nevada through federal and private land.
Just the number of people you have to interact with to get approvals is overwhelming if you're building a very long line.
This Wyoming rancher is one of them.
They just drew a line across on the map and said, here we go.
This other transmission project, backed by Utah-based Rocky Mountain Power, is set to cross these open plains on Hanson's ranch.
I want to see this land protected, not only for my family, but for other people to come out here and enjoy, just like you've done today.
That said, Hanson believes this line and others will be built. The nationwide push for renewables, just like oil and gas drilling, will demand sacrifices from some to provide power to others. For Inside Energy, I'm Lee Patterson. I'm Lee Patterson with Inside Energy, and these are the coal miners' daughters.
The tradition of coal is Gillette, Wyoming, so we wanted to incorporate that into our name and the way we skate.
Katie Buffington is a part-time miner herself, along with almost everyone else she knows.
Husbands, sons, daughters, cousins, brothers, sisters. Coal mining runs through our team.
And through her town. 1 out of every 100 Wyoming residents works in a coal mine, and most of the industry is here in Gillette.
Basically, we're looking at an open pit coal mine. They have the dirt exposed, they're removing the dirt so that they can access the coal.
And that's what makes coal mines here different from those in other coal states. 99% of Wyoming mines are surface mines like this one, which means the coal is cheaper and easier to extract. And the thick black coal seams layered into the earth show just a sliver of Wyoming's massive supply.
When you plug your cell phone in or you turn your light switch on, it's typically coming from this.
Wyoming produces a whopping 40% of the nation's coal, but overall, U.S. consumption and production is down.
Coal's had some struggles.
That's partially thanks to competitive natural gas prices, availability of renewables, and a recent proposal by the Obama administration to slash carbon emissions by 2030.
It's impacted jobs, it's impacted the economy, and it's impacted some of the companies that produce coal here in Wyoming.
Like the state's largest coal company, Cloud Peak Energy. They've reported losses the last 2 quarters. If those losses are a signal of an industry in distress, what would it mean for the coal miners' daughters?
We would become the daughters because coal is it's the industry here. If coal went away, so would the coal miners' daughters.
For Inside Energy, I'm Lee Patterson.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse for this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
Inside Energy is a project of Prairie Public in cooperation with public broadcasters in Colorado and Wyoming, funded in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. See more at insideenergy.org. And by the members of Prairie Public.